Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Kate Batchelder and Kim Strassel, and let's listen to Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate Minority Leader, taking an opportunity to address Florida Senator Rick Scott's policy proposals on taxes and Social Security. Let's listen.
That was the Scott plan. That's not a Republican plan. That was the Rick Scott plan. The Republican plan, as I pointed out last fall, if we were to become the majority, there were no plans to raise taxes on happy American people or to sunset Medicare or Social Security. So it's clearly the Rick Scott plan. It is not the Republican plan. And that's the view of the Speaker of the House as well.
Kim, Mitch McConnell is typically very considered, careful in going public and saying things, particularly about his own members. He didn't have to do that publicly in this case. Why did he do it?
Well, I think there's two reasons, Paul. One which has some merit, one which I think is a little bit more unfortunate. I think he wanted to come out and reassure people that this plan that Rick Scott, that he put out in the run-up to the midterm election, it is true. It was something that he put out on his own. He says that it was in aid of giving Senate candidates something to run on. There may be some truth to that. I think Rick Scott was also intent upon giving himself a little bit of spotlight. He has considered his own presidential run. There was a lot of criticism at the time that he did this unilaterally. It was certainly not a policy document that was decided upon by Mitch McConnell and others. In fact, there is some reporting to suggest that McConnell really didn't want this out there. So this is Mitch McConnell reassuring people that this is not what Republicans plan to do in the wake of all of these attacks by Joe Biden and Democrats claiming that Republicans want to push Granny off the cliff. I think a little bit of this, and this is the more unfortunate part, is a bit more personal. There has been some animosity between McConnell and Scott about that plan, but also Scott then challenged McConnell to his role as leader of the party. He lost by huge margins, but he nonetheless did that. McConnell, in turn, took Scott off of the Commerce Committee, which Scott felt was in retribution for that run against him. So there's, I think, a little bit of bad blood there, too. By the way, McConnell went on and suggested that Scott could, in fact, have trouble getting reelected next year in the state of Florida, given the number of seniors who live there, which was also something what was not necessary to say, but there's certainly not a lot of happy feelings between the two.
Well, I think there's also some frustration on the part of Leader McConnell because he had hoped to be a majority leader and not minority leader. And Rick Scott, of course, in 2022 ran the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee. And in that role, his job was to raise money, but also to assist the candidates and get the best nominees possible. And I think McConnell is sore, and I know a lot of the Republicans are, that Rick Scott did not play a very aggressive role in trying to work in the primaries so that the stronger candidates came through. In Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, New Hampshire, the GOP nominated some clunkers who lost. And that's one of the reasons they're in the minority. There's one other point, which is that I have no doubt that had the Republicans rolled up the score in the Senate with Rick Scott running the senatorial committee, picked up 3, 4, 5 seats, I think he would have used that and maybe thought about running for president himself in 2024 rather than run for re-election in Florida, which he has recently announced. Kate, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's possible. But to your point about candidate quality problems, because I think this is connected to that, I think the failure of the policy document that Rick Scott put out was that it really trafficked in American decline and was a dark, pessimistic view of the country and its possibilities. I think that was a broader failure than merely touching the Social Security question. I think, for instance, no kind of focus on opportunity and growth. And growth matters even for questions like Social Security. I mean, economic growth is not going to fix the problem entirely, but it can put a dent in how painful fixing Social Security would be. And so I think not predicating the GOP's pitch on growth and opportunity was a missed opportunity for Scott and kind of explains some of this discussion that we're having now. I mean, I think it's a perfectly fair question to discuss whether programs should run on autopilot without reauthorization forever. We have 2/3 of spending as entitlements on autopilot. I think that is a fair debate, and unfortunately it's become very tendentious by how it's covered in the press. But I think largely there was no Republican vision there, and it hurt Republicans, and I'm hopeful that they can kind of come around to a better platform and vision of what they would do if they win in 2024, and that might be part of the divisions that we're seeing here.
Well, just to elaborate on what Rick Scott actually proposed, for Social Security and Medicare, he said that he believed all federal programs should be reauthorized every 5 years rather than be an automatic pilot. And he said that it would apply to Social Security and Medicare as well. He didn't say, I'm going to cut them. He didn't say we're going to do XYZ reforms, just that they would have to be reauthorized. And of course, the Democrats have jumped on that and said, see, he wants to use that to kill the programs, predictably so, and predictable that they would say that. But, I thought it was a little tin-eared when he proposed it, but it's certainly not a radical proposal, Kim.
I think that's my frustration, is it's not radical at all. It simply says we need to treat all of these programs the way that we treat defense programs, which is that we reauthorize them every year. We understand that there are certain programs that are integral and well accepted in the country, and yet we're going to take the opportunity to reevaluate them and decide what needs to change as we're going forward, because obviously the country is not static. I guess that was my gripe, though, about this, is that it wasn't really very radical at all, but it gave Democrats the opening. My view is if you are going to alter in some way Social Security or Medicare, then be specific about what you intend to do. Have a policy, be ready to defend it, be ready to make the arguments for it. If you're going to give them that opening, at least have a real argument on behalf of why you're doing it. This struck me as a little bit more of Rick Scott wanting to sound bold on something, suggest that the Republicans were not scared to tackle anything, but without any precision. And so he's both given them the opening to go there without anyone in the Republican Party actually proposing something that would make anything better.
I know from my own conversations over the years with Mitch McConnell, he has a very strong view that entitlement reform can only be undertaken on a bipartisan basis. It has to be buy-in from both parties, and I think has to have each party operating from a position of some self-confidence and strength. So if you had a Democratic president, say, who was confident, and you had a Republican Congress, likewise, with a strong enough majorities, you could come together and maybe do a deal. But short of that, I think he views it as a very, very politically toxic and difficult thing to do. And of course, history would tend to bear that out. So not much is going to happen here on those Social Security and Medicare in the next 2 years. That's for sure, and not with a 5-seat majority in the House for Republicans and being in the minority in the Senate. But we'll watch this debate as it unfolds and see how the candidacy of Rick Scott proceeds here as he tries to get reelected in 2024. I'm sure Mitch McConnell will back him, and the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee will back him. All right, thank you, Kate, and thank you, Kim. Thank you all for listening. We're here every day, and we'll be here all week with more to talk about the American political drama or comedy, as the case might be. Thanks for listening.